Now we're going to solve some problems using equations. So same type of problems we just solved with proportions in the last video, but we're going to set them up a little bit differently. Mathematically, you get the same answer. It's the same basic math. It's just a setup of differences. And here's a couple key things that you need to know. Right? When you see the word of, it means to multiply. And we are always going to use a dot for multiplication because, or put a number in parentheses, because an x is an unknown value, so I don't like to use that as multiplication. When you see the word is, that implies an equal sign. We are still going to be using part to whole type of a things, but it's not as bad. And one thing is that if you have a percent, you must always change it to a decimal. And so that is an extra step when you're solving with equations rather than proportions. Remember, in proportions, we wrote our percent as a fraction. So that was our change. But in equations, you have to change that percent to a decimal in order to play with it. So let's jump in. 75% of 12 is what number? So we really just want to work left to right. So 75%, that's a percent. I have to change that to a decimal. So I move my decimal place 2 over, and I have 0.75. Of means to multiply. So I'm going to go ahead and just put parentheses, and we're going to multiply by 12. A number touching parentheses implies multiplication, so we're good. Is an equal sign. What number tells us x? So this is a fairly easy problem now, right? We're just multiplying. 0.75 times 12, and that gives us an answer of 9. Okay, so at some point in time I paused that. So I don't know where it paused, so let's just go back and refresh. 15% as a decimal is 0.15. Of what number? So we multiplied here by x equals 39. Because 0.15 is attached to the x, that's what we divide both sides by here in green. So we're dividing both sides by the number in front of x. So these cancel out, and we're just left with x. 39 divided by 0.15 is 260, and there's our final answer. Next problem. 250 is what percentage of 50? Again, let's go left to right. I just start with 250 is equals. It says what percent? Well, I don't know. And then of, remember that of is multiplied by 50. So when you're multiplying x times 50, whatever is attached to x is what we divide by. So we're dividing both sides by 50, and I get x equals 5. But that is not your answer. Remember, the question is what percent? 5 right now is a decimal. So I've got to multiply by 100%, which means my final answer is really 500%. That's a little bit tricky. This is why I'm not a big fan of equations in this case, because sometimes you have that extra step. You have to really be careful with the details, right? Because the details matter. If you need a percent, you've got to change it to a percent later. 15 is what percent of 90? Well, these you might want to try on your own. Pause it, get the problem, pause it, try to figure it out, and then come back and watch the explanation. Okay, so we go left to right. 15 is, now I have what percent? There's my x multiplied by 90. So remember, equal sign splits it in two ways. Because the 90 is touching x, that's what we're going to divide by. Because we want these to go away, 90 over 90 is just 1. So I'm left with 1x equals, and I'm going to just round to 0.167. Now again, we need a percent. So I need to multiply this by 100%, which gives me roughly 16.7%. And now we get into story problems. I think story problems are a lot easier with proportions, but we're gonna hammer away at equations on these. So state sales tax is 7%. How much tax would you pay on a $250 item? So I mean, if you kind of think through what they're asking, we're taking, you take your sales tax rate and you multiply by the price of the item, and that gives you how much you're going to pay in tax. So my rate is 7%, changed to a decimal. I'm going to multiply by the item, which is $250, and that's going to tell me how much tax I'm paying. So when we multiply 0.07 times 250, we end up with a tax amount of $17.50. It's estimated that 1.4% of the population has an allergy to peanuts, including a couple of my friends and my nephew. If the population of Indiana is 6.633 million, how many people could we expect to have a peanut allergy? round to the nearest whole person. Okay, so 1.4% of the population equals peanut allergy, right? Just think in words. So we know, change this, so if we move it 2 places, we get our decimal. Of means to multiply. So we're going to multiply by the entire population. Well, here's the population. So I'm just going to go ahead and type it in like this, knowing that my final answer now is going to be in million. Equals peanut allergies. So if I multiply these 2 numbers together, I get 0.092862. But remember, that's in million. Now, million means 6, right, times 10 to the 6th. So to get rid of million, I simply move my decimal 6 places. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that gives me 92,862 people are allergic to peanuts. And remember, that's because when I have 0.092862 million, that's like saying times 10 to the 6th. So then when you go to standard form, that's why we move the decimal 6 places, because million is times 10 to the 6th. That's why that works. And the last problem. If you paid $169.52 in income taxes on a gross monthly earnings of $1,304, what is your income tax rate? Okay, so again, if we take our tax rate times our earnings, that gives us the taxes that we're paying. So our rate is, I don't know, but our earnings are $1,304, and my tax is $169.52. So part of this is if you can understand what the question is asking in words, it makes the math a little bit easier. So again, we divide by whatever is touching x, which is the 1,304, because now that becomes 1. I have 1x equals 0.13. Well, we need to change that to a percent, so we multiply by 100%, and that gives me a 13% tax rate.